Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for stopping by. So I was tagged by Saracen Salute to take part in a tag, and this tag is for Filmtastic February, where I'm going to answer a series of questions dealing with books and movies. So this is kind of right up my alley. So I thought I would go ahead and do this tag. So let's get started. So the first question is your first memory of seeing a film at the cinema. So I'm pretty sure the first movie I saw at a theater was Return of the Jedi, which would have been in the summer of 1983. Have the Blu-rays here. I had the post. Yeah, you can see the poster behind me, sort of. So I remember I would have been four, close to 4 years old, summer of 1983. I remember going with my dad and my uncle to the local movie theater and watching Jedi. I just sort of remember certain images and certain sounds. Remember the first part of the movie. That's the one with Jabba the Hutt and Jabba's palace. Remember being a little afraid of all that, all those creatures and kind of the creepy Jabba the Hutt. I remember being a little afraid at that age to see it. And I remember when Darth Vader took off his mask, I remember thinking, well, that must be a big deal. Because I had probably seen the earlier ones at that point. And of course, the Ewoks, I remember, who were, for a kid, the Ewoks were great. So that was the first theatrical experience I really have a clear memory of. So yeah, so let's go on to the next question. A book about film. It can be behind the scenes, autobiography, work of fiction. That includes film as a main subject. I have quite a number of books on film, so I had just a couple I'll just quickly mention. The first one would be The Jaws Log by Carl Gottlieb, who was a screenwriter on Jaws, who was there working with Spielberg as they were shooting the movie, and they were revising the script. So for Jaws fans, like if you're a big fan of the movie, you want to learn about the making of the movie. I mean, this is from someone who was there, of really good first-person accounts, and just a classic of a behind-the-scenes look at how a very famous movie was made. So this book is highly recommended, and just a few more. Yeah, keeping with, this is a biography I have of Steven Spielberg. I have a number of books on Spielberg, but this is probably the best biography of Spielberg by Joseph McBride, who's a really good film scholar. And I think what makes this book the best about Spielberg is that he really did the research. McBride, interviewing hundreds of people and just really going deep with the research. But McBride's also a really good film critic as well, really good at film analysis. So you really get a lot of biography of Spielberg, but you get a lot about some good analysis about his films as well. I know, like maybe 20, 30 years ago, Spielberg could be a divisive figure among film critics, film scholars. Maybe there's still some of that going around because of his popular sensibilities, but I'm going to be talking more about Spielberg, so I don't want to go on too much here. But this is really a good book on Spielberg that I wanted to mention. And let's see, one more good film book I'll recommend with this one. This is a more recent book. It's Cameraman by Dana Stevens. Her book about Buster Keaton, and she takes a really unique approach with this book, where it's not like a cradle to grave biography. She takes this more essay approach, where she focuses on specific points in Buster Keaton's career. There's a chapter on his childhood, and there's one about his later in life when Buster Keaton had a lot of struggles, but also a lot of great stuff about the making of his movies. So yeah, this is another film book I'd highly recommend, and of course I could always recommend more. So Okay, so the next question is a novelization or tie-in book. Yeah, that's a great question. Novelizations, when I was growing up in the 80s, 90s, you would see these all the time at supermarkets and stores. If a big movie was coming out, it would probably get a novelization. So I just picked out two that I have. One is going all the Spielberg theme. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. This is still in print. I think you can still buy this one. By James Caan wrote this novelization. And what I like about this novelization is that it's told from the perspective mostly of Short Round, the character played by Ke Huy Quan in Temple of Doom, and it kind of gives a different angle to the movie. Like there's some, and another big thing with novelizations is that you would get some extra scenes that were not in the movie, so you would it was a slightly different experience. But I like the idea of this film being told from Short Round's perspective, who is 12 years old or around that age. So I really liked this novelization. And then there's Outland. This is a very beat up copy, not in the best shape that I have, by Alan Dean Foster, who wrote a lot of novelizations, specifically of sci-fi movies. And this film came out, I think, in '81. It starred Sean Connery. It's set at a space station where there's this corporate plot going on involving various trades, and it's a really kind of lived-in future. And it's if you like Alien, it's kind of has the same aesthetic as Ridley Scott's Alien, Outland, but this novelization is really good. It's just really it's well written. Kind of has a noir, hard boiled quality to it, which I thought really worked. So those are the two novelizations I thought I would mention. And let's see, going on to the next question: a film about writers or writing. Well, there's a lot of good films about writers or writing. I just picked out two. I could pick out some more, but there was just two I wanted. Two of my favorites. One is Wonder Boys. This film came out, I think, in 2000. This is based on a novel by Michael Chabon, and this is stars Michael Douglas as a great cast: Tobey Maguire, Frances McDormand, Katie Holmes, Robert Downey Jr. Douglas plays a professor kind of in a midlife crisis. He's written one successful novel a long time ago, and he's really struggling with writer's block. And it's a comedy. It's a good book about academia. There's just a really enjoyable movie and a really good soundtrack as well to Wonder Boys. And yeah, so just a lot of fun, this movie. And then another one I'll mention is Almost Famous. This was Cameron Crowe's film, I think from the same year, the year 2000, which is about his it's a semi-autobiographical film. Crowe, as a teenager, wrote music criticism for Rolling Stone magazine, and this is a kind of a fictionalized version of what life was like for him being a teenager following rock bands around. This film's really good on the rock scene in the 1970s, and Kate Hudson is really good in this movie, and so just a really good cast. Frances McDormand also she's really good. She's in this one too. So yeah, a really good film about a very young journalist of the 70s, and kind of navigating their way through the music world. So those are two I'd recommend there. See, going on to question 5 I'm up to now. A film that brings back fond memories. Well, a lot of movies do. I think that's what movies are all about. We remember who we watch movies with, and that's part of it. And a lot of times these days we watch movies alone. With the nature of things today. But if you catch a movie with someone, it's really good. And like I can remember, like in the '90s, getting like the independent film channel, and remember my sister and me would often stay up late watching movies, and would just discover a lot of really interesting movies around that time. And this was one of the station agent I remember catching on like the independent film channel, probably in the late '90s, early 2000s. This is just a nice character drama. Peter Dinklage is in the film, Patricia Clarkson, and it's just about three characters who kind of come together. I like films about unlikely friendships, and each of them has their issues that they're dealing with, and they manage to come together. It gets a little messy at times. It gets kind of, but also ultimately a really deeply film that feels honest. So yeah, a real favorite is The Station Agent. So I have fond memories of catching that one on late night TV way back. Seems like a long time ago. So let's see. Next question. A film that made you want to read the book. So that's an interesting one too. For this one, I went with The Right Stuff. The film about the space program, early days of the Mercury program specifically, in the late 50s, early 60s. So it's one of my favorite movies, The Right Stuff. In the book by Tom Wolfe, it did lead me to read the book, I remember later on, and I like the book too. Like, this is probably one of Tom Wolfe's better books, and I think one of the big differences is that Wolfe is sort of making a case that the astronauts are like the real heroes of post-war America, and they represent the best of masculinity, and kind of goes on that track, where I think the movie is a little more nuanced on it, where there's just a more satiric tone to the movie, where yeah, the movie does kind of lift up the astronauts, but all the other characters in the movie are kind of absurd, like the scientists and the politicians, and it's just I think a really interesting movie that's really funny and a really kind of unique historical epic. But the book is enjoyable, but it's also quite different than the movie. It's a good case of adaptation, where the director of a film, Philip Kaufman, directed the film, kind of goes in a different direction. So that's one example for that question. Let's see. Next one, what I'm up to now. 7. A book that made you want to watch the film. I think I had a few examples with this one. Just one would be, this is kind of recent, Tess of the Dubervilles by Thomas Hardy. I read this book, I don't know, a few years ago, and there is a movie version of it that came out in the late 70s. It was, I think, starred Natasha Kinski. It's directed by Roman Polanski. Just a really good adaptation of this novel by Thomas Hardy, which I really liked. I'm a Thomas Hardy fan, and I have some more of his books, and I'd like to read someday. But that's one case of a book leading me to a film, and I think there's one more I thought I would mention. Would be True Grit, another recent one by Charles Portis. I like the Coen Brothers film they made, I think in the 2000s, several years ago now. I really liked their version of the film is a lot truer to the book. There is the John Wayne film that was made in the 60s, which is okay. It has its moments, but I really prefer what the Coens did. And this is a really good book too. This is just a book that it's written well. It's a good Western, but it's just the narration is really strong throughout. It has a really good narrator. So yeah, I really enjoyed True Grit, a case where the movie led me to read the book. So okay, let's see. Going now to number 8. Films based on a book or story that bears no resemblance to the source. So for that question, I decided to go with, back to Spielberg again, AI, Artificial Intelligence, which was based on a short story by Brian Aldiss called Super Toys Last All Summer Long, which is a really short story. It's maybe 5, 6, 7 pages. It's very short, and of course this had been a project Stanley Kubrick had been developing for a long time, and he passed away, and Spielberg took over the film. So it is a case where the short story is really barely the first act of the movie. And I guess this is a case where the movie just takes a short story and expands it. It really expands it into this big epic story. So almost like taking some inspiration from the short story. So that's was AI I went with on this one, and maybe this film was finally getting its due. I think it was a little ahead of the curve when it came out, where audiences didn't quite know how to take it. I used to teach this film, show it to students, and students never reacted too well to it either. I don't know, there's just something about this movie that maybe it's too bleak. That might be, it's a dystopia that doesn't really give you a pat on the shoulder as you're watching it, which is rare for Spielberg but his later films do get much darker, much more serious, and I think especially the ending to this film, which is quite devastating on a number of levels. So this is a case of an adaptation where the movie really expanded upon the concept from the source material. So that was my answer for that one, Spielberg's AI. And let's see. So the next one is just to recommend 5 films. So I picked out 5. I could recommend way more. It's kind of hard to narrow it down to 5. So I'll just have 5 films that I'll just mention. I tried to go with a variety of movies. So the first one I'll recommend is El Norte, directed by Gregory Nava, and this is a film from the 80s, from the early 1980s, and it's about 2 young people, a brother and sister in Guatemala, and the situation there gets very dangerous, so they decide to leave and head north to America, and it just becomes this really epic film about the journey of these 2 people. It gets into the immigrant experience, what it's like to be an undocumented person. It gets into how the labor system works, the exploitation happens, the very precarious position of people coming into the United States hoping to build a life. So this film, I think even though it's almost 40 years old, over 40, it really hits hard. It's just a really really good film. Highly recommend El Norte. Let's see. I got some serious films at the top. I kind of get less serious with the bottom, but the next one is Ikiru, directed by Akira Kurosawa. This is I like all of Kurosawa's movies, most of them. This is one of his more well-known ones. This is simply a film about a man who learns that he has a limited time to live, months left in his life. And the movie's about what he decides to do with his remaining time left. So the movie plays with time a lot. Like, there's flashbacks to his earlier life. It gets into how he feels about his family, his children, his profession. He is he works like in the public works system, a bureaucrat for the public works system, and just starts to. It's really a film that gets into the meaning of life and what does it mean, and the film might change your life actually watching this. The film is that I think profound, and it's certainly one of the greatest films ever made. You don't need me to tell you that. Many other people will tell you that, but Mikiro is definitely a must watch. So that's that one, and kind of getting a little bit less serious now. This is The Stuntman this is I think 1979. This film came out. It's from the 70s. It's often not brought up in conversation when talking about like all the classics of the 1970s, but it's a film of the 70s, but there's also, it does feel out of time as well, as you guess from the title. It's about a film production, first and foremost. It's really a movie about movies. It's also about perception and how we perceive reality and how film can manipulate how we see reality. It's about megalomania. There's a love story in here as well. Peter O'Toole is in here as one of the leads. He plays the director of the film. It's just an incredible performance by Peter O'Toole in The Stuntman, and it's just a movie that's full of surprises. You never know where it's going. It's always just surprising you, and always a lot of tonal shifts, and you think it's going this way, and it goes the other way. And all the way to the end of the film, it really builds up to a really cool ending for The Stuntman. So that's one I'd recommend. And let's see, few more. This is Local Legends. This is I guess like a mockumentary by Matt Farley, who is I guess you say he's a regional filmmaker based in New England, and he's a musician, but he's also made many films. He makes films with non-professional actors. It's sort of like a very indie approach, very low budget, but he keeps making movies. And this is kind of a documentary about his approach to life, his approach to making art, especially in the modern era now, where it's so competitive, it's so hard to get your voice out there, and some of the creative ways he tries to stay creative and to try to live a life. And this movie's pretty short too. It's just over an hour, so it's not long. You might be able to find it in some streamers somewhere, but and then if you get into some other Matt Farley movies, that'd be great, because he's really interesting. But yeah, so Local Legends is one I'd recommend. The final one, kind of bring us full circle, Attack the Block, from, this was 2011, I want to say. This is kind of a retro film. It's very evocative of like Spielberg movies, Joe Dante movies. It's about a group of kids battling an alien invader. It's set in London. It stars John Boyega in an early role for him, and just a great cast, but the whole cast is really good in this. It's really funny. It's a little scary. It's also kind of got a little bit of Alien, a little bit of the aesthetics of Ridley Scott's Alien too. So it's has this retro vibe to it, but it's also really modern and just a really good creature feature. And I always recommend this movie to people, so I thought I would talk about Attack the Block. So alright, so last one is to tag people. I figure, hey, if you watch this, consider yourself tagged. I don't have anyone necessarily specific in mind, so I'll just kind of leave that up to you. But yeah, this was enjoyed talking about these movies, enjoyed doing the recommendations, and yeah, thanks again to Saracen for tagging me, and hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I will talk to you later.